Welcome everyone, and thanks so much for coming to this session. I promise that there'll be lots of actionable insights, so whilst I'll be doing lots of talking, there'll hopefully be some good takeaways for you as well. So I think you'll all agree this is a very important topic. We, as a mental health and wellbeing provider, we deeply understand this area, but we're always looking at ways to improve and share insights on how employees are feeling. So our goal is to share these insights so that you can really understand the current experiences that people are having around the world with mental health. So the survey itself, it's the 5th year that we have run it, and essentially we survey employees, CEOs and HR leaders. And the idea is that we're getting a real breadth of insights and content that we can then share. And essentially we started this pre-pandemic, so there's definitely been lots of positive change since 5 years ago, but we still definitely have a way to go. And this report really recognises some of those challenges. So, as I said, we will be looking at actions that you can take from this and really help you to try and transform your organisation. And I will start with looking from Key Insight 1. And Key Insight 1 is all about a sense of dread. Now, when I saw the word dread, I thought it was quite a big word for Headspace to use, but 87% of employees experience dread at work. So I think the Sunday scaries is something that we've all probably had at one time or another. And people are saying that they feel this sense of dread once a week. And the biggest reason for this dread that they cited was a lack of stability at work, and also rising expectations to take on more responsibilities. That's often as a result of layoffs, people getting more responsibilities than they had before. Another reason that this could be is hybrid working, which I'm sure we all agree has lots of benefits. However, it does blur the balance between work and home life, causing more of a sense of dread. And then I mentioned layoffs earlier, but also concern around job security and what will happen to them in the future. So that's a bit more about the feelings of dread. What can we do to support employees that have this feeling? First, it's about really outlining our expectations as an organisation and sharing back with employees. Being intentional and creating really sustainable, clear goals that can help your team prioritise with workload. I think it's really important to be very transparent in a way that's sensitive to employees. And one way to do that is to really over-communicate the why. So by grounding your team in the mission, you can celebrate the wins and help them understand what they're working towards. Focus on what you can control. This one really, really stuck out to me. And some suggestions we have at Headspace is having some sort of routine to your day, whether it be a walking meeting or some other self-care routines that you have. Just really helps people to reduce dread, but have a sense of stability. And also flexing daily self-compassion. So in order to support others, we of course need to feel well within ourselves. So notice how we speak to ourselves throughout the day and think, would we speak to a colleague in that way? Are we giving ourselves the same compassion that we give to others? And can we support ourselves to feel less stressed during the day? So that was Key Insight 1, all about dread. I'll now jump into our second insight, which is all about DEIB, which is diversity, equity, inclusion and belonging. And this one was looking at the policies and the impact that they have on an organisation. And 54% of the employees that we surveyed felt that this policy made a big difference on their mental health. And we actually found it to be true among all participants. So it wasn't a particular race or identity that thought that they were useful. And it really benefits the whole workforce. And there's a real misconception that it only impacts some type of employees. So it's really positive to see that everyone has this high on their agenda. So some actions on how we can centre diversity and inclusion in your policy is to train managers on how to speak about race and other important identities in the workforce. So really continuing to train people so they feel equipped to talk about this at work. The next way was, really considering that people have one whole self that they can't put on a shelf when they go to work and then later on go back to their home self. So making sure the work environment, events that happen throughout the year really tailor to all different types of identities to give people the space and strong sense of belonging at work. Next was really looking at the diversity and inclusion policies and make sure that they are aligned and not siloed to other corporate actions that you're taking. So how important is diversity really? Does it feel authentic in the workplace, and what can we do to make sure that it does? And also think about it not being just a tick box. How can we truly care about it in the actions that we take at work? And then something that we've been thinking about at Headspace with a global company is how do we respond when there are traumatic incidents that happen around the world? Employees in this survey, 97% said that they were really impacted at work from things like economic uncertainty and war. So how as an organisation are we supporting employees with those topics? Now I'm going to move on to Insight 3. This is all about HR leaders and the huge pressure that they feel as a responsible person to have to support employees in times of change. I think we can all agree that HR people are humans too, and they're under a lot of pressure, not only from the organisation, but from employees too. And interestingly, the HR demographic, as part of this report, was reported to be the least likely group to actually use tools to support them. So all of the benefits that they've worked so hard to put in place, they're not actually making the most out of them themselves because they're feeling so stretched. And some of the reasons for this that they have cited is continued change, rolling layoffs, and shifting workplace realities, but also feeling a real burden to support employees whilst the organisation tries to improve the bottom line. So what can we do to support our HR leaders? First of all, it's going back to that self-compassion piece, but really encouraging HR leaders to put their oxygen mask on first and to carve out time for them to take care of themselves so that they can feel that they have more space to support others. The next thing was to actually check in on your HR leaders. When I read this report, I slacked my HR director immediately and just said, "How are you doing? I've read this report," and if I'm honest, I had no idea how impacted and how stressful things may have been for you. So just being a human and checking in on people is, of course, important. Then it's also for HR leaders to create boundaries that they can stick to. So if you are an HR leader, thinking about that point that I said earlier on focusing on what you can control. Unfortunately, we can't change everything. So what can we have an impact in whilst protecting our own boundaries? So that's all about HR leaders. And now we're going to flip to CEOs. So this was an interesting insight that 64% of CEOs said, if there was a recession, we would increase the amount of benefits that we offer to employees. However, there was a real disconnect as employees felt that they would be cutting back on tools to support their mental health. And also, CEOs are feeling that sense of dread, 59% in fact, more than any other group surveyed. And CEOs in this report also cited feeling that they only can talk about really positive things and that adding to their own pressure and anxiety. So CEOs are humans too. But for the CEOs out there and founders, we were thinking about ways to support you. And we've come up with a number of actions. The first one is being aware of how you show up. as a CEO, you really have the ability to set the tone and opportunity of the company, be a culture carrier, and also find what feels really natural and showcase that authenticity. I was speaking to one of our health coaches the other day, and they said, don't be a shapeshifter. And that really made me laugh, because I think often we're all trying to be people that we hope other people understand, rather than being our authentic selves, who people like working with anyway. So there's some tips for CEOs. The other one that I thought was really useful was setting a to-be list and writing it out if helpful. So if you've got lots on your plate, or you've got a big company all hands coming up, perhaps saying, I want to be clear and compassionate, and grounding ourselves in those to-bes. The next is setting company goals that employees really feel that they can reach. So outlining again and again what your goals and OKRs are as a company, and how employees can roll up into those goals. So I guess that all goes back to being super transparent. Another suggestion that we have is creating an open space, so an Ask Me Anything lunch with your CEO. So you can either have them ask anything live, or perhaps they could submit questions ahead of the lunch, and it just gives people the opportunity to learn about the company from the CEO's perspective. So that's for CEOs. Our next insight is all about CEOs talking about their mental health in the workplace. Time and time again, people ask me about Headspace and how we can make our organisations, employees feel more comfortable about mental health at work. And the number one thing that we have seen is when CEOs or senior leaders speak about their mental health experiences in a way that's really relatable to the people that they work with. So we not only suggest this at Headspace, but this survey showed that CEOs are actually talking about mental health a lot more than they did in the past, a huge jump to 87%, really closing the gap on mental health and the stigma in the workplace. So I think we've definitely made some good progress, but there's still a long way to go, and making sure that CEOs can set an example for talking about mental health and giving people the space. So we have come up with a model called Modelling What Matters, and it's all about how CEOs can share insights with their teams. Mostly it's touching on transparency, so being super clear on things that a CEO feels comfortable with sharing, that can help their employees. Leading by example, so walking the talk, and showing up when needed. And also leading by example and living the culture that you would like to promote. One of the approaches that we have is the vitamin versus aspirin approach for a mental health strategy. So a vitamin will, if you take it daily, promotes long-term health, whereas an aspirin or a paracetamol is a temporary measure. So we try and encourage people to have a consistent mental health strategy that is communicated from the CEO to all employees. And we have got those insights from listening to organisations around the UK, Germany, the US and Australia, so lots of people out there. I now have time for a Q&A. If you have any questions on the survey, mental health in the workspace or Headspace, I'd be happy to answer them.